All right. Looks like we're live. Excuse me. Let's get a color fill started. And we will decide what we're going to work on tonight. I have some things pulled up for reference. I pulled them up just a minute ago here. And we may deviate from this, but I love the light hitting this fountain here. All this sculptural work. It's underlit here. I like all the little, these kind of recessed ambient occlusion type things going on there. That's really cool. So yeah, I think we'll start with that and see where it goes, and then we'll go from there. And this time, I'll say this at the beginning of the live stream rather than the end. I think it would be a really good idea to have your own project pulled up, and it doesn't need to be really in the same vein as what I'm doing at all, but I think if you're going to watch the stream, it is helpful to be making progress on your own work. I think we can soak up a lot of knowledge and look for a lot of information and then lose it if we don't apply it quickly. So I think it would be better that you paint something or draw something and half listen than it would be to closely listen and not apply any of it. So with that little bit of unsolicited advice, we're on our way. So I'm just going to block in some very general, very loose values here. And I'm looking at my reference, and I'm just trying to block in kind of the colors that I see, the hues, and some general value shapes. So I can see there's a kind of this darkest area up here. And it's interesting, you kind of hit your defaults, I think. I'm defaulting to having this heavier shadow up near the top, and as I get into it, I'm seeing, okay, actually I'm observing that it seems to be darkest down here towards the bottom in a lot of these recesses. So I'm going to be mindful of that. We'll push that a little bit darker. I'm also seeing some almost reds back there, and so we'll get that blocked in as well. So actually, let's go ahead and push these darker, and then we'll bring in those red tones. This is kind of showing us, what is recessed behind the various elements here. You have all these kind of overlapping shapes, which is really cool when you think about it in terms of the sculptural forms. Sometimes when I'm doing any kind of 3D work, I often forget, like, oh yeah, I could really layer these different things, separate these forms, and push it farther than just basic shapes. You want to have these kind of cues for depth. Okay, and actually that's interesting. Now that I'm looking at this, I'm seeing there are more columns back there than I initially noticed. So that's cool to catch. And then here, I'm just probably going to imply a lot of this, but there's a pattern going on in here, and so I'm going to try to get these little wedge shapes in there, and it appears to be a dome. The reference kind of cuts off, but kind of want to show these shapes being a little bit larger and flatter when we're looking at them head on, and then kind of a little more like slice-like, I guess, as we get to the edge. Okay, push this back a little bit. This is darker in here. Okay, then we'll bring in those reds that we were talking about. I do a new layer here so we don't lose that, but I think we can just kind of blend this in. This is one of the really fun things, I think, with marble or light stone when you're working with it, is that it picks up all these different hues, whether from light or from mineral deposits over time, as they, these things erode and get rained on and all that kind of stuff. Okay, and I think we'll extend some of this red down into here. So there are more of these kind of pits and peaks here that we can pull out. But as you get down into this area, there's more light bouncing around because it's more out in the open. And so even the darks are a little bit lighter. Shift this back over more towards yellow, orange, I guess. And cool that off just a little bit. And then we got some interesting, like, yellow ochre type stuff over here. I think that's the term. It's pretty bad on my color descriptors. We'll have to fall back on the tractor colors. This is like a 40-year-old John Deere tractor, having been in the sun. That's a description we can all relate to. Okay. Let's see here. I don't want to go too high in value. You can see just how much brighter that is, and so we can come down almost kind of middle gray and still get away with calling out a lighter tone. And I think what we can do here is block in the light here, and the value that we had previously blocked in, we'll leave that as our shadow. me zoom in just a little bit. I know it's probably kind of tricky watching the stream to tell what I'm doing when I'm zoomed out, but I do work zoomed out that way almost all the time until you get into the very final details and stuff. And then I zoom in because I want to work the image. I want to be able to see it as the whole image and not as, I don't want to get fixated on the individual parts necessarily, which is kind of what I'm doing now already, having it zoomed in like this. It's so maybe I'll just stand back a little bit. That might help, and I can still see it kind of small and not ruin the video experience. Okay. This blocking is taking longer than I wanted to, so I'm going to try to look at these more as abstract shapes rather than the things that they represent, and be a little more aggressive with it. Let's see this. Okay. It's getting a little out of whack with my reference here. It's about right. And we have now this I might normally just go one stroke up like this, but I do kind of want to feather that edge and give it a little bit of texture, so I'm going to bring it across. Let's see. Well, this is kind of interesting. This statue back here is just peeking out of the shadow. It casts a shadow right here, and so we'll leave that area in shadow there. Actually, that ends there. That's interesting. So there's something above here that's casting a shadow down on the form that we have to take into account. And I'm going to switch my secondary color. I'm going to desaturate this a bit, maybe bring it up to a warm tone, but a warm gray. And with this I can kind of come back in on any of these areas that I think I got the shape, the block-in shape, incorrect. And this can be a pretty good way to kind of work back and forth between shadows and light. Just kind of jump between those two. Okay, actually this whole thing right here is misplaced. So we're gonna paint over it and move it up here. That's actually, that might not be the only thing that's out of place. So we're kind of looking at some of our relationships here. With architecture, we could get away with a little more, maybe. It's not like anatomy where you're really stuck and have to get all the relationships pretty much perfect, because you can just kind of add more architecture than is actually there. However, then you have to kind of struggle through the perspective. So I actually may be looking at a photo that has a wide angle lens on it, so that could be affecting what we're seeing. Alright, now we'll come back to this down here. Now that we've moved some things around back here that we can play with. Actually, there's a few more things that I'm seeing that I want to address real quick. So there's like another pillar back here. I want to make sure we get that in, and then there's one right here. And height-wise, I want to get those kind of lined up. This is probably actually much higher. Clear this out right here. Bring in see some greens in here, but we'll go more towards yellow. We'll keep everything in that kind of strong, warm zone. darker here. And I think we'll probably revisit those red tones as well and bring those down in here. And be kind of jumping between these red and green, and that'll make that area a little more exciting to have those contrasting colors. So I'm going to squint and need to adjust this shadow shape in here. You know, I've got all those dark colors there, but there's a kind of a larger shadow shape there that needs to be introduced. And then I will make sure we're still warm. It's actually pretty interesting looking at this. This looks kind of cool. I mean, a cooler color in comparison to the colors next to it. However, on the color wheel you can see that it is actually quite warm. So we still want this to be a shadow value, but we're warming it up to get reflected light. Let's see if we get some down here. And now I'm kind of looking at the image and squinting and trying to block in these shapes. Actually, all of that will be in shadow there. All of this. Bring in some more warm tones here. Let's see, we got this shape here kind of fades into these. They're warm, but they're a little more muted than we have in those shadows. Interesting little shapes going on in there. To imply some detail up in here. Same thing kind of going on here. need to darken up this column and then give it a balanced light on that side. And then same thing over here. We'll kind of soften all that up. And bring in a little bit of a core shadow there. I want to soften this edge since it's rounded. Okay, I guess we'll come back in here. Believe it or not, there's a horse right here. We got rid of it. We started it and decided it didn't belong in that spot. And to move it. Let's see. This guy, he's like reaching over. He's actually kind of like pulling the horse along, it looks like. And this, we're going to move even more towards those yellow greens. Maybe a little bit higher up there. Still, I'm kind of searching for the right color there. It's hard to tell exactly what's going on here, but it all gets kind of dark in here, and then his face is like right here. Shoulder, get a little shadow there. We need to just reestablish that shape. This horse's head is let's get some interesting stylized hair here. I think we'll go just a little bit darker with that to show that the connection between these two. We might have to adjust that at some point to get that a little closer anatomically. Okay. Don't want to get too lost in the weeds. That's my MO. Getting lost in the weeds. Keep the big picture in mind. Okay, so then these two legs kind of converge. Let's get this kind of radiating design there. All right, let's get a little bit of this shape more defined here. Okay, something like that. I think I want to extend this, start to blend some of these colors here so that it's not all the same brightness value that we're playing with. But kind of have it, I think, radiate out. I should learn more about this sculpture. There's some interesting themes here. It's like they're all kind of wrestling with these horses. Can't seem to tame them. I'm sure there's some kind of mythology that this all alludes to. Just looking at the chat, we got a hello here. Welcome. Thanks for joining in. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Or if you just want to chat it up, that's fine. This may be a shorter night than usual. I typically take these, towards midnight, and don't think I really want to do that today. I've been trying to get on a better sleep schedule, and it's always a battle. But last few days have been good, and I don't want to mess that up. I do want to keep these streams going, though. Just the discipline of doing this every week has been really beneficial for me. So I don't want to lose that, but turns out the body needs sleep. Turns out. Here. At least in the reference. Hey, Adonis. See you in the chat there. How's everything? Yeah, things are good. This week, actually, today was a pretty good day. Today, I did some VR sculpting in the morning. Been playing with some new tank designs and working out a method to get them quickly to the printer. Nothing really quite ready to release or talk about, but the process has been going on. We're looking into it. So that's how I started the day, and then had a friend of mine come over. We did some work on Fantastic Tanks with the decal sets and that sort of thing. So it's already been a good day as far as getting some work in. Feeling pretty good about how things have been coming together. Let's see, get this gesture going on here where this all kind of, let's see, might be a little bit too early to try to explain what's going on, but some interesting gestures that I'm kind of seeing and trying to tease out. Really is interesting to work from sculpture. It's, well, on one hand, it's nice that it's still, but there's also just a lot going on that makes a good sculpture a good sculpture. As I was kind of alluding to earlier, all these kind of overlapping shapes and showing depth, and here I'm kind of seeing these rhythms that start to come out. And all of this stuff I think is fairly universal to different applications and mediums for art. Trying to catch those rhythms. And figure out how the eye will perceive these shapes as they overlap each other and so forth. Okay, I've got something weird going on here that's actually just not in the image there. It's like I had him as if he was wearing some crazy hat or something. I'm not really sure what's going on here. There's something behind him, but it looks kind of unnatural in the reference. I don't know if that's just the way the light is. There's like this little swirl going on here. We'll see. We'll see if we can make any sense of it. How have you been doing, Adonis? Have you been able to work on any of the things we had talked about? It's been a little bit now, probably probably a month or two. But I know you were working on, and we talked about line quality and that sort of thing. I'm going to work in the beard here. Okay. Once again, getting lost in the weeds. We gotta rein it back. Do the things that are important. So he's got these kind of minor shadow shapes going on here that we can work in. Push all of that back, farther back. And then adjust that shape too. And then this foot is raised up here, so you like the ankle bone. And then he's stepping on something. As you might expect, it's typically what we step on. Something. And then we'll bring in just a little bit of that form there. Okay, I need to zoom out. I feel like I'm getting too close to everything and trying to, bring in some details and stuff that just aren't that important to me right now. So I'm going to switch over to a rougher brush. How about this? Maybe this texture drag. And I want to introduce some more value shifts, a little bit of texture, some shifts in hue, all the things. We'll go to kind of this almost pink value. Salmon, we'll call it salmon. Bring some of that in, a little darker with that. In the background. There's some in these reflected lights here. It's amazing how many hues are going on here. I see these bluish purples in the shadows, and frankly that could probably be handled with a gray, because it would read gray off of by comparison. But let's put some in. Let's see what we get here. So ever so subtle shift there. And we'll try to line these up, right? So we've got this little line here, and we want to kind of reference that in the shadow. And then I actually see it shifting to almost green. And let's see, this is more purple in there. Sorry, we haven't gotten to the green part yet. Right, so over here we got these like greens in the shadow. And who knows, this could be just image interpretation from the camera, or rather color interpretation from the camera. But I find it interesting, so we're going to throw it in there. And then maybe we'll pump some of these up a little bit. Those are more intense. Let's see. You know, I did diminish some of these. And that was intentional. However, it's not in the reference. It doesn't have to be in the reference. But I do want to see if we can clarify some of these a little bit. Just to show what is in light and what is in shadow. And then if we clean up the shapes a little bit too, then they should read a little more clearly as, you know, these architectural elements. I'm going to add some more here. Kind of push all that over. That's too much, really. That doesn't need to be that defined, you know. I mean, even being as kind of loose as it is, it just doesn't need to be. It's not that important to the image. That makes sense. So I think it needs to get pushed back. And we're definitely overdoing it with these angles up here. Alright, what time are we at? It is almost 10 o'clock. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, we're going to bring in a few more elements here. I'm going to soften these. So I color picked a shadow value. I'm going to soften this. And make it a little less saturated. And then I'm going to bring in these horizontals down here. And this should, fingers crossed, counterbalance some of what's going on with these more dynamic shapes in the sculptures. And I might come in and, I'm going to give these just a little bit of a curvature to them. But for now, I think this will be adequate. Let's see, I'll bring in a few brick lines here, and then there's like a shadow that is cast here, kind of all over this whole thing. And we can fade this out a little bit. So even though we have a shadow value here, it's still lighter than what we have back here for our recess, where these, where this little sculpture back here lives. And okay, I mean, I guess it's not that important, but I do kind of want to push this sculpture back and give it some form. But let's focus on the important things first. Try, Eric. Try to focus on the things that matter here. Start bringing in some definition to these shapes. There's some. So this is like. There's a fountain here, and there's these little, there's these rocks here. They're kind of in the way. And then the water makes its way down, as you might expect from a fountain, or from water in general. Kind of does that, kind of goes down. Pro tip. So we're gonna show that edge there, and that's actually in the image, that is the brightest point. We could bring that in. We'll do we'll risk it, see if we can crash Photoshop, and do the blend if option there, and bring this into our light values here. And maybe bring in some, there's like this nice, by nice I mean almost sick yellow green in the just behind the water. So maybe we'll do the opposite. We'll do another layer here, and we'll blend this, if, hope we don't crash, under that light value. So we'll bring this in like so. And then we'll bring in these shadow. So shadow value there. And up here. And it kind of shifts towards a warmer tone in there. We have to start kind of explaining these shapes as to why the water is flowing the way that it is. So to some extent you can be abstract, but then you gotta start explaining some of this stuff so that it makes sense. I suppose if you want it to make sense. Caveat. Okay, there's like a nice saturated yellow in here. Seems to be more prominent on this one side, and then kind of grades over. And then get the same effect here to kind of show that. That ridge, that edge right there. I think we need to cool it a little bit with this, that white value. Cool it. That's the technical term. Not technical at all. We need to, basically we need to push it back so that it's not such a strong shape there. I don't think it's a bad thing to start with a strong shape. Because then it thinking. It has a simplification to it, and it can lead the eye around in a simple way. But you know, you're almost in you start to border on cartoon if you get too blocky with the shape of it. Let's see, now this is a little more warm here. And let's see how this would line up. So we're starting to define some of these shapes a little more. There's like a rock shape that comes up here. There's some really crazy shapes going on in here. I mean, this just looks so rough and organic in the reference. So I guess he's like riding the waves or something. So we're bringing our value up just a little bit in our lights. And I'm just going to kind of dab a little bit of that texture on there. Because it falls over this edge, just a little bit there. And then that's kind of the splash where it hits here. Actually, that's kind of interesting. Now that I'm looking at it, like this is almost like an arrow. It kind of points over. We'll bring in some more shadows and stuff behind it to push it forward a little bit more. And move this more towards the warm tones. And I'm just bringing some of this light. It's really not quite white, but this bright value I think is perceived as white in the water, and I'm pushing that back just a little bit on this one side so that it grades in value. And then I think we can actually take this value of the yellow and then bring that down a little bit and then grade that over as well. Make it a little more interesting, have a little more depth, won't be quite as flat. All right, bring some of this value up. Find these shapes a little bit more here. Bring some more warmth in there in the reflected light. See the light coming down, hitting the water, bouncing up. A few more shadow shapes that I missed or ignored previously. And actually back here, I'm going to lighten these up. You know, I had gone with that more subdued gray, but it was a bit too dark. So course, unless I push the rest of it back. We may do that. Let's do that right now, just to see if we can play with the values a bit. I'll use this might be a good textural brush, and I'm seeing this shift. It's interesting. There's a lot of reds back there, but then there's also kind of this slight shift into cool gray. So maybe we'll do this as an overlay. We'll just bring this in the background, in the shadow area. Push these shadows even further. And this is kind of tricky because there's just a lot of light coming in down here where the sculptures are. So to really accentuate the sculptures, I think we need to push the background a little bit darker, bring the sculptures forward. That is these, like the horse and the men trying to subdue the horses. I'll bring that value down as well. Actually, this, I'm wondering if we don't have the opposite effect here, where the light coming in this way hits these, bounces back up, so it would be lighter over here, and then darker on that side. And then I think we'll do a separate overlay layer to bring in some lights and maybe some warm up some values and stuff. All right, so we'll do that now. Overlay. Kind of tempted to just paint it on, but I think we can build it up. So if we build it up, then I think we can kind of work in these interesting hue shifts and so forth, and then if we paint over it directly, then we have a kind of an opaque color, and then all of these textures underneath that have color variation in them. And I think I kind of want to handle that as a solid shape. So we'll fade. So we'll fade that down from the top down to the bottom, to where it'll be less prominent. In fact, I may even go with a blue, you know, and then just work those back and forth. Maybe instead of blue, we'll go with like a magenta. And then all of this, I think, could be subdued just a skosh. Oh, I mean, I guess there is a little bit of back and forth in there. Let's see. I think we may as well just push all of this back a little bit. I think I did a little magenta there. I don't know that I like that too much. I might just do almost like a straight blue. And that should tone down all the warmth in the background, darken it up. Push it all back. I don't want to do too much because I want this still to feel like a luminous scene. He says as he proceeds to do just exactly that. Pushing it all back. Bring some warmth into these shadows. It might be time to just bring the paintbrush back out and just paint directly on top of everything. It might be time for that. some really cool sculptures here. Like, it's amazing, you know, like this like background sculpture. It's so awesome, and yet didn't even make it as the centerpiece. It's wild. A little bit humbling too. Figure, man, whoever made that knew what they were doing. Way more than I do. And it's the background piece. Finding my place in the world, I guess. Okay, so we're going to do a new layer, and we're just going to paint direct. And I think I might use natural drag is a good one, or the sinful onion. It gives a good variation in line thickness. Okay, before I do this, I'm going to take a drink. I have a peppermint tea. My apologies for the sound effects. I'm a terrible person. Okay. So I'm going to grab some of these values, and we'll just start making some more defined shapes. You know, as we leave the shadow area here, it's sometimes nice, and you can kind of see it. I can see a little bit in the reference to group your brights and your darks against each other, right? So your light value up here, right as you cross this shadow ends, and then you've got kind of the brightest edge there, because now that's facing the light. That may seem like the silliest thing to say, but what it does, you know, you don't have to go straight. I mean, you could take this lighter value, or rather darker value, and you could have this shadow kind of turn the form, and if that makes sense, that's what you do. But in that grouping, if that's your the brightest value in your grouping is right butted up against your shadow shape, then you have a nice strong contrast there. Same here, where I'm adding some saturation right on the edge as well. Right as it turns the form. And we're just going to break up those shapes just a little bit so that they're not like exactly, they don't feel exactly the same. And then we'll bring this kind of curvature down the form. Okay, so earlier I was talking about these rhythms. I didn't really explain that too well. But basically, it's this. And then you've got these nice diagonals too. So obviously these are diagonals, but I mean diagonals kind of coming towards the camera. The way, even the way he's looking is, you know, this way. And then his feet, I'd say they're off balance, except I'm pretty sure that this foot is going back like this, and then this one's coming forward. And then of course you got the flow of all this drapery around him. And it's hard to tell in the reference image whether this is, it looks like almost like maybe they had to do some photo correction or something, and that got blurry back there, but it looks like he's got this, like, you know, almost cape-like thing coming up to the top there, but it's blurry, which is weird because the rest of the image is sharp. So anyway, these kind of gestures are important things to be looking for, instead of just kind of drawing or painting it linearly, hoping that it's going to be, you know, that your anatomical understanding is going to line up with also being interesting. You kind of have to do some graphic work to increase the level of interest. All right, he's got this great big beard going on here, which we need to perhaps define a little better. And I may be depicting this a little more grandiose beard than is actually on the statue. think I need to find a happy middle ground between those two values there. And then I need to get a nice bounce light so that I can still show that there's form there. That might be too much. I don't even know why I'm trying to. It's like you know that it's there, so you want to make sure that you get it in there. But again, it just might not be that important, so try to subdue all that detail in the face. It's just not necessary. Okay, what are we doing here? All right, I was gonna push this leg back a little bit because I think that it is kind of moving away from us as it moves towards the foot. And so I think we want to show the top of the knee and show that that's kind of pushing backwards. And sharpen that shadow up there. Now this is not a soft brush, so it's not the one to be feathering in, that sort of thing. Make that curve kind of subtle. And I think we need a stronger light there. All right, now there is a form back here, so I'm going to try to bring that back in. And same here. I want to kind of make this a little bit firmer. It's not, it's just kind of a loose, soft edge there. So I want to harden up that edge. And the edge is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the edge of one shape into another, and how the brush, texture or the tightness or softness of that transition is rendered. Now, a soft brush would make a whole lot of sense for a horse, but I just don't feel like changing my brushes right now. Tighten up that neck a little bit. I think we'll flatten out these colors in the background a little more. Okay. So I think at this point, you can start to see how just coming in with an opaque brush over top, so even though this is not letting me feather any of this, you know, now we're getting some of that texture from the opaqueness of this brush, but then we're also getting some of the benefit of the value modulation underneath it. This needs like a shadow under his foot, you know. I don't know that it's, I don't really see it in the reference, but you know, it just makes sense. There's also like a little rim. Oh, I did put that in there. A little rim light on the back side there. A little rim light here. Actually kind of like that. Alright, I think we can sharpen up some of these rocks in here. Maybe bring the value down just a little bit so we're not competing with what's up there. These colors down here are like way off. I think just all that blending with, what do you call it? Overlay layers and all that sort of thing. I think that's what got those into this range that just doesn't feel right for what's going on. Not entirely sure how I want to handle this hair. You know, I'm following it relatively close to the sculpture, but I'm also thinking how in 2 dimensions we might kind of redefine the shapes to be clearer. Alright, and then this dude's like, come on, horse, we're going this way. Doesn't look too happy about it either. that face too much, but we'll get a little bit more of that beard in there. A little bit more of this gesture. Telling you, I think they always added these like extra anatomy to the torso or something, just to make it elongate it a little bit or something. I don't know. Just doesn't seem quite right. Something like that. Might break up some of those lines a little bit there. Oh boy. Alright, so we've got a little bit of face to define here. Whole bunch of kind of shadow shapes going on here. So this guy's casting a shadow. The horse is casting a shadow. There's some other shapes back here. We simplified those a little bit, but some of these, I think these are like wave shapes. You know, like I think they're like fighting the horses. I need to learn about this sculpture. It just looks like they're fighting horses inside a wave. Which is interesting. Interesting concept, I guess. Again, I'm sure it's got a reference in mythology. Okay, well, bring these shadow shapes in again, kind of re-establish that. See, we got just these little details here. It's almost like he's riding a conch shell or something. So he's on this shell type thing. Man, I'm just feeling really ignorant right now about what this is all about. It's got to be like one of those, everybody knows that kind of things, you know? But not this guy. Is this like Poseidon or something? He's the water god, right? Or am I even in the right culture here? Roman or Greek? I actually don't like those last, I wanted to brighten that up there, but it just seems like it was the opposite of what I wanted to do. I've had this weird realization in the past that sometimes I do, if I have an idea and I'm like, I think it would make sense to do, X, Y, Z. Sometimes when I do the opposite, just that unexpected feedback, just the thing that happens that you didn't expect to happen. Sometimes that sparks more interesting results than if I did what I thought analytically, made sense to do. Just, things are just far more complex than we give them credit for. It's good to break things down and try to figure out how it works and how to reproduce a shape or an image or whatever, but when you do hit those walls and you just experiment with something that's unexpected, sometimes you see something on the canvas that jumps out at you. Just way more interesting. I suspect that it would be a good idea to kind of mute all the contrast back here on these sculptures. But I don't know, I thought it'd be cool to give them a fighting chance. After all, the background sculptures never really got to be the foreground sculptures. Sometimes you gotta pay attention to these background things because they're pretty awesome. I think I might bring this all down a skosh there so that I can get the length on the legs that I need. They're just not quite tall enough there. Maybe bring that arm up. The foot comes up here. Really, in fact, all this should probably just be a little darker. Might make more sense that way. And then even the angle on this is off, so I'm gonna bring that up. Okay, so I guess we push all that stuff back now, right? So we might do like darker color, and then we pick this color, come down a little bit, and then just go over the whole thing. So it's going to push all of the kind of lighter tones in the background back farther. That's one way to do it. I might brighten it up as it comes towards the bottom. So that's kind of what I'm seeing in the image here. And then let's just use like a feather brush. We'll use this W head flat. It's nice for feathering in. Well, feathering in whatever you want to feather in. In this case, we're going to soften some of this light and shadow. I think that's what we want to do. We'll just make this a hard shadow here, coming off of this, the back of this guy's head here. And then maybe we'll do the same thing here. So we've got this, maybe not quite that dark, but have this shadow coming off of the horse onto his arm. And we'll change some of these shadow shapes in here. let's see, we're hitting 11:08. So this will be about the time that I'm going to check out here. I'm going to do just a little bit more definition before we call it for tonight. So we do another shadow here, cast from that horse. Let's see. I think we can unify these values back here. Just a wee bit. Yeah, it's all too dark back there. I want to bring that up in value. I'm not wild about leaning so heavily on warms and cools to accomplish the delineation there. Between foreground and background. I mean, it works. It's going to work, but I'm not even sure if I want it to. What areas still could use with some definition? All right, I think it's about time we do the old curves, overlay, kind of see where we're at. We intentionally left ourselves some room . Guess we'll take the whole group and move it to the center here. That might make more sense. Okay, so we got our curves. Let's do our color balance. See, we're in the shadows here. So do we want to pump up the color that we put in there, or do we want to diminish it, push it towards gray? I kind of like that light bleed, you know, where the warms in the light are pushing into the or rather over top of what we would see in the background there. Okay, and it's always interesting. You do a color balance, and then you end up not super far from where you started sometimes. Let's put the curves over the color balance, and vice versa, see if that changes anything for us. I might diminish this curve. I like it. I think the whites might be a little too intense. And the color balance, I might just have this effect only the brighter colors. So I'm going to push that up. That way it's not affecting the background that we've darkened up. Of course, we have our overlay that we typically throw in, and I will do this with a soft brush. I have to go find one buried deep. You know, I'm going to go kind of greenish with this. Maybe a little darker there. Pull out those greens a little more. And that's kind of what you'd expect from green. A little more green. Okay, alright. It's getting late, it's getting tired. That's my excuse. Alright, we'll move some reds in here. Reestablish that red that we were feeling in the background. And I'm not really totally sure what I want to do here. There's some colors that I might want to neutralize a little bit there, so I might come back with something else to handle that. Let's see, I'm thinking darken this up a little bit. Those shadows. Bring those contact shadows, where any of the forms meet. Strengthen that shadow in there. Okay. Those yellows are pretty strong, huh? Let's do a hue saturation. We'll try to grab that yellow range. So we'll just go max it out there, find it. There's too much green, so we're going to move it over. Okay, somewhere in there, and then we'll give that just a little bit of a feather. Now, bring that down. So we're just subduing those a little bit, shifting it more towards red. Kind of want to introduce like a cyan or something in the highlights, just to cool them off. Yeah, the colors getting away from us a little bit here. So that's quite a bit of a change, and we could maybe bring that in. Yeah, somewhere around 70-80%, something like that. All right, it is about 11:30. I think this is probably a good place to stop. So we did some statues, a little fountain. Still fairly rough. If we were to zoom in, and we are, you can see that's all just pretty rough textural brush strokes there and stuff. But we're going for the big picture, the big idea, how the light falls on the form, that sort of thing. Balancing it out so that the sculptures come forward out of the background. All these rocks are very much abstract. That might be a whole bunch of work to get those in representationally less abstract. But as we established, they're really not that important. They're kind of secondary to what's going on here. I'm just gonna play with something real quick here. So I'm looking this over. Bring in some water here, and I'm gonna soften it, and then I'm gonna use the chain eraser to get some of those edges that we'll be looking for. Alright, so we got the eraser. Let's get this chain kind of look to it, and so we can just do that in the direction of our, that might be a little too strong there, in the direction of our water flow. And you know, one thing we didn't do at all was the smudge brush. I love that smudge brush. We'll actually maybe show a little bit splashing up behind that, but not directly on that. Not directly off of that edge, if I can help it. All right, a little more watery. Kind of interesting because it's flowing kind of all around. It's even over here, stuff, but we didn't really depict it that way. Okay, we'll probably stop here. So let me see what we've got with all these. Not sure how much that's helping, that overlay. I might give that just a little bit there. Color balance, curves. All right, and then if we take all of these adjustments, sometimes it's fun to do this. You take it, group it, I name it the adjustment or ADJ, and then I will switch between, you know, seeing what you painted, just trusting your eyes, and going through the process. And you do get some kind of color fatigue as you're staring at the same image for a couple hours. And then what you came up with, kind of on reflection, and then adding in some adjustment layers, color changes, all the shifting the colors, rather than painting it directly. It's just kind of interesting to me to see. And sometimes I don't 100% like the change, you know, and try to kind of find the middle ground. But I think we're pretty much there on this one. I like that. So, all right, I think this will be where do I stop on this? I'll go full screen here. Move it down so you can see the water. All right, so that is it for tonight. Thank you for joining in. As always, hopefully you got some progress down on some of your own paintings, and should be here back next week, Wednesday night around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you for joining, and have a good night.